Hi everyone, this is Michael Butterman. I'm the music director of the Shreveport Symphony. When we experience a work of art, whether it's a painting or a poem or a ballet, for example, we experience it through a kind of filter, I guess you would say, that is the byproduct of all of our life experiences and even to some extent the psychological hardwiring that we all have. And so it's probably not surprising that when I look at a painting, I tend to find the correspondences between it and the world that I'm most familiar with, which is music. And so when I come to the Norton, I am drawn to this work by Chapoval. The collection that the museum has is vast, of course, but I tend to favor or resonate with art that is abstract, at least to a certain degree, or not overly representational. And I think that has to do with my experience with music, because for the most part, composers are not trying to write a piece of music that sounds like a traffic jam or that sounds like a bird, although there are some exceptions to that. But more often they are working in the world of melody, which is shapes, and form, which is to say, when does this particular musical motive come back, and is there balance and symmetry and so on. So those are the things that I notice first of all. So when I look at a work like this, for example, I notice the palette, tones and colors that the artist has chosen, and in my estimation it is muted. There are a lot of taupes and darker hues. There is also a kind of, in a way, simplicity to the structure of the piece, which is to say that it looks like it is made up of a relatively few primary shapes that have sharp angles. This is a Cubist work, so it's geometric, I think it's fair to say, in a lot of respects. It looks like different layers of shapes have been laid on top of one another. And I have to admit that for a long time, when I was viewing this work, it was a study in shapes and colors and contrasts and layers and so on. And it was only once I stepped back a little bit that I was aware that, oh, there's actually a figure being represented in this work. A gentleman, it would seem to me, who looks a little unhappy or stern in some respect. He has sort of a aquiline nose and a sort of a downturned mouth, at least the way I see it. And there's almost this sense of these high ruffled collars that one finds in the Renaissance. I could almost imagine that this was, in a way, a figure that you might have seen in a Rembrandt or some other of the Dutch masters' paintings, but now somehow viewed in a very much 20th century perspective. Now, one thing I like to imagine as I'm looking at a work is what it might sound like if you could somehow translate the images and the shapes and the colors into something you could hear. And so I asked myself, okay, well, let's suppose I had to write a piece of music based on this painting. What would it be like? Well, the first thing I would notice again are the colors. So I said that I find them muted and dark. And so that would, to me, suggest things like bassoons and clarinets, these darker woodwind colors, maybe French horns in a sort of lower or mid-range. Nothing terribly loud. I don't think that I would, in terms of the dynamics, I don't think that I would write anything about mezzo forte, for example. There are no surprises, no splashes, there's no jolts that I see or feel when I look at this painting. In terms of the tonality, whether it's a major or minor or maybe atonal work, I think I would choose a vaguely, I think I would write this in kind of a neo-Baroque or neoclassical style, which is to say that I see this figure and might want to represent him with some kind of a melody that sounded like something from the late Renaissance or the early Baroque. It's a piece that I would love to be able to write. Unfortunately, I have no talent whatsoever as a composer. My job as a musician, as a conductor, is primarily to get inside the mind, imagine what the composer was trying to get across, and to bring that to life as faithfully as possible. But it certainly would be an interesting exercise to try it, and of course I would love to see if a more talented composer could come along and try to create a work of music that reflected this work by Chapoval that I love very much. I hope you've enjoyed hearing my comments and that you get down to the Norton and see this for yourself.